Good evening and welcome to the Wednesday, September 6th regular council meeting, and we are beginning right at 6 p.m. We honor all the many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit whose footsteps have marked these lands for centuries. We acknowledge that the ancestral and traditional lands on which we gather are land of the Blackfoot Confederacy and Treaty 7 territory, a traditional meeting ground for many Indigenous peoples, and in particular our neighbors, Siksika Nation, on whose traditional territory we work, live, and play, and on whose traditional territory we stand and where Strathmore resides. Good evening. I'd like to confirm the agenda. And do any of the councillors have any emergent items for tonight's meeting? Seeing none, I'll turn to administration. Kara?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're recommending the Council add 8.5, the Power Plus Agreement, which is an amendment to agreement.
Thank you. Anything else? So then we're looking at a motion to confirm as amended. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move that Council adopt the September 6, 2023 regular Council meeting agenda as amended to include point 8.5 Power Plus Agreement Amendment Agreement.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We have no public hearing tonight. And since this is the first meeting back for September after our August break, I just want to remind members of the public that you are welcome to provide comments regarding items on the agenda in person during the council meeting, virtually or in writing. Should you wish to provide public comments virtually or in writing, please fill out the request to speak at a council meeting form that can be located on the town's website and submit it to lsadmin@strathmore.ca by the end of the day on the Sunday before the council meeting. In order to ensure procedural fairness, council requests that the public refrain from speaking, all of you in the gallery, to ensure procedural fairness. And we ask that you refrain from speaking on items that have been or will be heard through a public hearing process. And I don't believe we have any delegations tonight. So that moves to the consent agenda, item 6. Are there any items on the consent agenda that councillors would like to see put into the regular agenda? I see Councillor Wiley first, then Councillor Montgomery.
Sure, I'd like to put 8.2, the Pride Crosswalk new location, into the regular council agenda.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Councillor Montgomery?
Yeah, I would just like to discuss 8.3 rural renewal stream, please.
Okay, so those two items will be put into the regular council meeting agenda. So then I'm looking for a motion to that effect.
Your Worship?
Councillor Peterson?
I'm sorry, Your Worship. Just on 8.3 and 8.4, bringing them out when we don't have the fullness of the information was the reason for deferment, right?
Through the chair, they were extension requests for both those items?
Yeah. So
are you saying you would like?
well, I just think it's a really good idea to defer them until we have people here to speak to them. That's why we asked for to have them deferred.
And are you feeling quite strongly on having it not be deferred till the?
I actually just don't think it's being deferred long enough. I think we should push it back to November sometime.
Oh.
Well, why don't we just leave that with administration? And then we don't have to pull it out for discussion.
Kevin, would you be able to comment on that if that is something that's feasible?
Well, I think the motion for the rural renewal is to extend it to, I think, October 2nd.
Right.
Right now, there's a motion to bring it back tonight. So if the motion to extend to October 2nd wasn't granted, then we're not really following process.
Right.
So either there needs to be a motion to extend it to October 2nd, which was on consent, or if a council member wishes a different date, then there would have to be a motion to that effect.
So would the cleanest process just be to have it removed from the consent agenda and then we could have a motion to defer it then?
Sure.
Okay, I think Jonathan and Kara are in agreement with you. So that's good then. Councillor Montgomery, did you want to make that motion regarding the consent agenda?
Sure, thank you. I will move that council adopt the recommendations of the following agenda reports by an omnibus motion. And I'll do everything except for 8.2 and 8.3, please.
Is that clear enough, Jonathan, with lead services? Okay, thank you. Is everyone clear on the motion then concerning the consent agenda? 8.2 and 8.3 will be removed and placed on the public one. All right, any comments on that motion? Jonathan?
Sorry, Your Worship, just to confirm, 8.5 is on the consent agenda? Council's okay
Yes.
with that?
8.5 was the one that we added tonight, right?
To the agenda, yeah, that's correct.
And you're okay, and you're saying it's on the consent agenda?
If council's okay with that.
Does everyone understand that 8.5 dealing with
Yes.
the power?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. There's no further discussion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to the oh, we don't have to do that. I have to remember all this again. You'd think. Thank you. We move now to item 8.2 under business, Pride Crosswalk new location, and it's located on page 27 of your agenda package. Good evening, Mark, and welcome.
Hello, Your Worship and Council. Thank you very much. So I'm here to speak tonight regarding a new location for the Pride Crosswalk. As stated in my report, even though that's a little bit of an error, there was a meeting held in July with Skate-More Girls, Wheatland Youth Network, and the Prospect Human Services, excuse me, to request the creation of a Pride Crosswalk for initially on 2nd Avenue and 2nd Street, and then that later was changed to on Thomas Boulevard. Thomas Drive? Sounds right. Anyway, sorry. Ultimately, council administration met with the involved groups, and it was determined that a better location may be here at SMFB at the municipal building on the north entrance off of Park Lane Drive. So that's the crux of my report. If there's any questions of council, I'll be glad to do my best to answer them.
Thank you, Mark. Questions? Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. So since the municipal building was built, I've noticed that these two crosswalks tend to have gotten worn out pretty fast because for whatever reasons, people drive quite aggressively over them. I've seen people doing burnouts on both of these crosswalks that are in this picture here. So I'm concerned that we are picking a location where if we know ahead of time that people are already driving kind of aggressively and doing things to just a regular crosswalk, we're kind of setting ourselves up for a problem if we put a crosswalk that we hope is not going to be mistreated. So I'm raising this as a concern. I guess I'd like to put it on the record that we already know to some extent that this crosswalk, even without the rainbow on it, already sees a lot of damage from people driving on it. So I'm curious to know, if maybe there's another location we could put it, if it's going to be put somewhere, rather than a place where we know it's probably going to have people, because 2 weeks ago, somebody could do a burnout on that and it's fine, sort of. But then, 2 weeks from now, somebody does a burnout on it and it's a hate crime, right? So I don't know that we should, necessarily set ourselves up for failure like that.
So in my experience through the chair, it's in a relatively low vehicle access. I mean, typically crosswalks need refurbishing every 3 years. But typically the Pride crosswalks are done annually as an event by the community groups as a bit of a gathering and annual refresh of it. So again, it's pretty standard practice to do it once a year, and the town is not undertaking this work. The community groups are, so it's at their prerogative when they want to do it.
Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. So my concern isn't about the upkeep of it. From personal experience, I've seen people doing, like I said, driving very aggressively on this particular crosswalk, and like I said, doing burnouts. So I think that if we put it somewhere where we know that burnouts are already happening, then we are asking for somebody to do a burnout on the Rainbow Crosswalk, which is going to, I think, paint the community in a negative light, is what my concern is. And like I said, I think we're setting ourselves up for failure if we know ahead of time that people are going to drive a certain way on this spot, and then we put something that's like this on that spot. So I personally would suggest that we find a safer place for it. I mean, like, you know, it doesn't have to be even a crosswalk. I mean, like, you could just move it over onto the sidewalk or something like that, right? So, but that's one point I guess I'd like to make. If somebody else wants to say something, they can. I have another couple of questions, I guess.
I have a question following your line of thought, and that is, CAO Scoble, have you had comments from our operations team or our head of operations that the crosswalk here in our town parking lot has been a problem to maintain and repair since we've moved here?
I'm not aware of any. I don't know if Ethan has any history, but
Your Worship and Council, majority of the line painting within this town needs to be done annually. We do know that. We have tried out actually just on the corner here a new product that we're going to test throughout the winter to see if it does last longer. But generally the expectation is that everything gets painted in May or June, and by the time winter's over, most of it's gone. So that's the general expectation for line painting in most of Alberta, just due to our weather. Like I said, we are trying a different product, but essentially we do know that it's an annual process.
With this crosswalk being on the town property of the town hall and not in a heavy traffic area, it would be an easier area to repair or fix or adjust paint should something happen. It could also be a situation where we look and see how it goes if we were to approve this and then make that decision based on how it's been treated. Is that an option that could be considered, Ethan?
Yeah, Your Worship, I mean, paint can go two ways. You can definitely continue to repair it. And also, if you choose to move to a different location, removing it is not all that difficult either. So I do know that the group is looking at using high-quality paint that's appropriate for this use, but again, based solely on our winters and snow removal practices, it's going to be something that's required to be redone annually.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn now to Councillor Wiley and then Councillor Mitzner.
If Councillor Mitzner has a question, she should go first. I have an alternate motion to make.
I would like to see it in the downtown core as they originally proposed, and I don't like the idea of doing a test project and then moving it for public approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiley.
Sure, I'm going to make an alternate motion tonight. It's going to actually be, I move the council rescind this resolution number 179.07.23, the Pride Crosswalk Resolution. And simultaneously, I'm actually going to bring in one from over the summer that I think we need to look at side by side. So I'm also going to move the council direct administration to draft a bylaw to repeal the Community Standards Amending Bylaw number 2327, the Graphic Images Bylaw. And finally, I'm going to move the council direct administration to bring both the Pride Crosswalk Resolution and the Graphic Images Bylaw to a future committee of the whole meeting for council's consideration. And I need to be able to speak on that motion.
Your Worship, if I could request a point of order. This is, the contents of that motion don't actually completely relate to the agenda item being discussed.
I'd be happy to speak on why I think they do.
What I guess my question to you, Councillor Wiley, is: Are you linking in your motion all those things?
Yeah.
And does that? I think Councillor Lang made is expressing the idea that goes against what the potential motion was.
Sure, I'd be happy to explain why they really
I'm
do
sorry,
need
my
to be.
point of order
Okay.
overrules you, sir.
Okay, make your comments, and then we'll go to Councillor Wiley, and you'll be able to speak.
That bylaw, I'd be happy to defer to administration, but as I understand it, The community standards bylaw is not in any way related to the report we received this evening, nor the agenda item in question. I'm not sure how they could be linked. They're not both discussed in the report that we received. So from my point of view, this is out of order and shouldn't be considered at this time. Just the second portion. The first portion aligns with the agenda.
Councillor Wiley, or I can turn to I can turn to Jonathan. Jonathan, with our procedural bylaw, are you strong enough in the new bylaw that we've come forward with as far as dealing with this type of a motion that goes?
So, thank you, Your Worship and Council. So, motions should reflect the topic that's being discussed. Having said that, I know later on in the agenda we do have council statements where another motion can be made similarly. So, council could split this motion up into two different points of the agenda if they so chose.
But currently we have his motion on the floor. Is that a motion that can stay on the floor, or based on our procedural bylaw, does it have to change? We have a call for out of order, point of order.
Yeah, but it has been debated, so motion to rescind would need to occur.
I didn't hear you.
A motion to rescind would need to occur just because it's been debated already, so it now belongs to council proper.
Okay.
Has it been debated though? We haven't really finished the motion and I call them out of order. Point of order.
I mean, ultimately, it would be up to the chair. Having said that, there has been discussions about the motion and debates about it, so I would recommend.
Jonathan, while we're on this topic, how does a motion like Councillor Wiley's tie into the concept of all councillors having the same information going into a meeting? Like, this motion is quite different and quite, I'm not sure the word I would use. It's something where I know in our governance session we can bring in a motion, but when it goes so different to what has been done and it's linking things that aren't related to each other, this is a bit of a confusion for me.
If I can maybe jump in, I just want to kind of maybe echo what John has said. I think, again, the appropriate perspective at this point is to rescind. There has been some, again, not maybe detailed debate, but some debate specifically on the motion. Let's pull it back. Again, let's specifically to what John said, we should be discussing the item at hand here, which is the crosswalk itself. And there is an opportunity later to, if there is a desire to have a discussion about referring or providing direction, the council can have that
So
discussion
are you
and
saying
debate
that
separately
council-
from this. This should be focused specifically on the
Are you
pride
saying
walk.
Councillor Wiley's motion is allowable, or is it out of order?
It is out of
It's out of order. So that's something
But
the
we're
mayor
also
would
trying to provide
decide.
us a solution here, right? So that again,
Okay.
like,
All right, so that's something that I would decide upon. Well, I would agree. I think the motion is out of order. It's far different than what was originally presented and brought. And I guess I'll go to Councillor Wiley. You probably want to speak on this a bit.
Sure, I'm good with either way. When I make my statements, though, it'll make sense how I see them as connected. And then I would be prepared to just bring the second part of the motion forward in, I believe it's section 10, which is, I guess, council statement, section 10.1.
And in your statement in 10.1, will you be bringing forward a motion there as well?
So if it's the will of the chair, then once this is rescinded, then I will just do the first part of my motion.
Okay, I feel this is out of order because it goes against what's on our agenda. It deals with something that goes beyond the agenda item of 8.2, which deals with the new location of the Pride Crosswalk. I think the location of it and tying that into the pamphlets with imagery is something that I don't see related as far as if.
Sure, once I make my statements, I think it'll be clear.
Okay, so turning to Jonathan, then if I rule it out of order, we just carry on until we get to that item 10?
Thank you, Your
Or is
Worship.
someone going to put a motion on again dealing with the,
I think, Your Worship, a motion to rescind would be my recommendation for the previous motion, and then
okay.
Council can.
Sure, I make a motion to rescind the previous motion.
Sorry, may I, Your Worship?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying,
I'm not
Councillor.
sure what we're rescinding. We have ruled the motion out of order. Therefore, it does not exist. It died. According to what I understand of Robert's rules and the procedures, once something's ruled out of order, it doesn't move forward. And asking to rescind it would be, to me, moving it forward for a decision.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. So there was discussion on the motion. Once that discussion occurs, that motion now belongs to council.
Okay. Thank you, Jonathan. So because we started discussion on it, and we should, even if the discussion was to say point of order, that's considered a discussion on the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. There was other discussions
Yes,
too.
okay,
even-
so that means that the motion, it has to be rescinded according to Councillor Wiley's latest motion.
If I can maybe just jump in here too. Ultimately, like council, how council chooses to conduct. I don't want to get so hung up on the procedure piece of if you're comfortable that it's out of order, you've made the call, right? Then make that call, right? That's what when we've gone through our training before, right? That's what Ellie would say is let's not get hung up on this meeting being perfect, right? I think the issue is that it was determined by the chair to be out of order. We have found an alternative solution for.
So there's no need to have a motion to rescind?
I think at this
because
point, if council says, this is up to council. This is not, we can provide it, but it's up to council.
Okay, so I've ruled it out of order, so then there would be no need to rescind the motion. And then we are dealing with the item that Mark has brought to us, which deals with the location of a potential Pride crosswalk. Is that
Sure.
where we stand right now?
Then I'll try again. I move that council rescind resolution number 179.07.23, the Pride Crosswalk Resolution.
And did you want to speak to that?
Yes, please, but you're going to have to bear with me because I'm a history teacher. I say everything with too many words. So I've written this down. In 1945, Alexander Solzhenitsyn was arrested for holding views considered unacceptable to the Russian Communist government. After 8 years in a Gulag prison, he wrote about his harrowing experience and was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. In the Soviet Gulag, Solzhenitsyn suffered extreme deprivation from cold, heat, malnutrition, and exhaustion, and separation from his family and friends. He is a person who had every reason to see his opponents as evil. Nevertheless, in response to the accusations that the Soviets were evil, he reflected, and I quote, "If only it were so simple. If only there were evil people somewhere insidiously committing evil deeds, and it were necessary only to separate them from the rest of us and destroy them, but the line dividing good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being." In other words, he is saying the people who caused his suffering for almost 10 years are not evil. In fact, he suggests that evil exists within each of us. The line, he says, between good and evil cuts through the heart of every human being. Now, everyone from Buddha to Aristotle to Jesus Christ would agree with Solzhenitsyn. This worldview is the foundation of our current liberal democracy. It is my worldview. There are competing worldviews to this idea, namely, for the sake of this discussion, Marxism. The Marxist worldview defines Solzhenitsyn's Russia. And while Solzhenitsyn was in prison in Russia, this Marxist worldview was also spreading through China. In China, Marxism spread through the Cultural Revolution under Chairman Mao Zedong. There are people in this very room who were alive during Mao's dictatorship, and some of you even remember the Cultural Revolution. Chairman Mao was a Marxist. Marxism teaches, and Mao believed, that the line between good and evil was not within each of us, but was between different classes of people. Under Mao's Cultural Revolution, everyone was divided into only one of two groups. He called them the Reds, and those are the ones that his government approved. They were rewarded. And then there were the blacks, who were denounced and censored. Mao called the blacks part of the old way. He described them as the four olds. The blacks were old culture, old traditions, old customs, and old habits. In Mao's China, the Reds were rewarded. The Reds received special privileges, government jobs, parades, power, and protection. The government, through the media, celebrated the Reds, whereas the blacks were punished both in words and deeds. There were posters plastered on walls, loudspeakers were set up in the cities, and meetings were conducted called struggle sessions to denounce them. And the part I hope we all remember, eventually this Marxist cultural revolution turned violent. Alternately, in a liberal democracy, like the one we have in Canada, there are two things that are done to prevent a cultural revolution. First, in Canada, individuals are free to express themselves. Individuals have a right to say controversial opinions. Individuals have a right to believe in new ideas, as well as old dogmas. And unlike under Marxism, individuals are free to have differing values, beliefs, and opinions. The second way in which a liberal democracy keeps us united and free is by forbidding the government from dividing people based on class, race, ethnicity, religion, values, or beliefs. It's supposed to be impossible in Canada for a government to have a celebrated class and a punished class of people. That ought not to happen in a liberal democracy. Now, if we take a look at the Pride Crosswalk resolution, and later on we look at the graphic images bylaw side by side, I think we'll see we're making a big mistake. Just consider, is it possible the Pride Crosswalk resolution and the graphic images bylaw are accidentally and unknowingly leading us ever so slightly away from a liberal democratic worldview and toward a Marxist worldview? Is it possible that by trying to celebrate and affirm people who identify as LGTB, are we accidentally creating a government-approved social class? Remember, in Canada, individuals have rights to paint their own driveways, fly flags on their cars, but the government must not. Is it possible that by trying to censor pro-lifers, as we see in the graphic images bylaw, we are punishing a social group that one might consider to be part of what Mao called the four olds? Do we think they're old culture, old traditions, old customs, old habits? Remember, in Canada, individuals have the right to toss unwanted flyers in the trash and express displeasure on social media, but the government needs to tread carefully when it comes to limiting an individual's freedom of speech. I'm almost done. The line between good and evil is through the hearts of each of us. I'm afraid we're accidentally drawing this line between different social classes. I'm afraid our municipality is honoring, celebrating, and affirming one class of residents while censoring and silencing another. And I urge the rest of council to support my motion. Thank you.
Okay, and that's the motion that was ruled out of order. I'm just trying to understand your long treatise. I don't see where the punishment of a group is occurring with the potential of a rainbow crosswalk. I don't see where a punishment is coming in that's being supported by a ruling government or a municipal government.
Sure, that's why I had tried to place the two of them side by side so it would be more apparent.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Montgomery?
Thank you. I was going to mention this, I guess, with regards to just the location of the crosswalk itself, but I guess...
Sorry, can I just interject for just a moment? We have a motion that's been ruled out of order. Yeah. Right now, we've had some discussion and comments made, but we should have a motion on the floor to have more debate and discussion.
Yeah, he made a motion to...
I thought the motion you made was the one that tied everything in. Oh, so you want to rescind that? Okay, thank you. So now I get that. So you can speak on that. Sorry.
So I guess too, something that you said, Mr. Mayor, just now kind of, made me think about one of my points that I was going to raise, and that is, so in the absence of a policy, so what we're doing here, or what we're proposing to do, or I guess what was done, when this crosswalk was passed, is we have given a certain group license to create a permanent or semi-permanent political display on public property. So one of my concerns is, what liability are we creating for ourselves if we do not have a policy in place and we are approving or not approving these things in an ad hoc way? And I guess to Councillor Wiley's point, so if another group comes and wants to paint a crosswalk with some sort of politically, well, like with any sort of symbology that's politically, leaning, how are we going to, what are we going to point to and say, no, you cannot paint your, political message on public property? Is that going to be discriminating against another group that comes? And if it is, what sort of liability are we creating for ourselves by not having a policy in place that would be more neutral, I guess, and would create a standard by which we are actually approving? Like if we're going to have groups displaying political messages on public property, then we need to make sure that we're applying that ability and rule fairly, I would say. I do support rescinding this. I mean, that's one of the suggestions of administration, is to rescind that resolution. But I do have concerns about allowing people to use public property for political speech in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson and Councillor Wegener.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just need to say that my belief system drives everything that I do, and I just so firmly believe the communities are for everyone. And everywhere in our community, there are public symbols of support for groups. And I'm particularly proud of this community, that we move in directions that look at persons who have been marginalized in this community. Outside of this office is a garden that represents our Indigenous community and accepts that these huge and grievous wrongs that were done because there were enormous misunderstandings that drove considerable distress and harm to a particular group. When it comes to this crosswalk specifically, and in terms of the motion, visibility and inclusivity are critically important to marginalized groups. And a pride crosswalk should serve as a visible symbol of support and inclusivity. And it sends a message that this community is valued and it's accepted. And this is a community that has been marginalized, has been tortured in some cases. I think it's really useful to think about the fact that Canada, the government of Canada, our liberal democracy, has just warned Canadians to not go to certain states in our neighboring country because it's dangerous for people of the LGBTQS2 community to travel to these places. A pride crosswalk in this community, from my perspective, inspires hope, and I think it encourages and fulfills advocacy that responsible officials, elected officials, have an obligation to speak to in every instance that it comes before us, in order to make sure that communities are for everyone. Councillor Wiley speaks to my heart. You thought I was done, didn't you?
I did.
Councillor Wiley speaks to my heart when he talks about Solzhenitsyn and the Gulag Archipelago, because it stands as one of my favorite books, and it contains one of my favorite quotes. One of the things that Solzhenitsyn said was that violence can only be concealed by a lie, and the lie can only be maintained by violence. He goes on to say that when this is proclaimed, and violence is the method, people are inevitably forced then to accept that lie as the principle. And I think it applies when we talk to this, because while the quote does not directly relate to bigotry, it is related to the concept because it highlights the connection between the violence that's been visited on a marginalized group by a more powerful entity. And it speaks also to the maintenance of power and control over a marginalized group. So this is why it becomes even more important for people in a liberal democracy to stand for persons who are marginalized. Otherwise, our communities cannot be for everyone. And so, Your Worship, I am not in favor of this motion, and certainly would applaud the group that has continued to fight this very necessary fight.
Thank you. Councillor Wagner and then Councillor Langmaid.
Yeah, excuse me. My comment is not so much on the motion of the crosswalk or even the pamphlets, but it's more along our procedural bylaws and procedures. We voted on this last month to accept a crosswalk. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but it was approved and it was passed. And here we are a month later talking about this same amendment or this same motion. I think we have to look at our procedural bylaws and put procedures in place that will not allow this to come up month after month. It makes us look indecisive. If this motion gets passed tonight, do we come back next month with another motion to rescind that past motion, and it goes on and on? So that is, again, that's just my thoughts, my opinion.
So if I follow that, then Councillor Wagner, are you thinking of a motion at some point to bring back the procedural bylaw to possibly make amendments to it?
Yeah, I'll think about it and probably 10.1.
Okay, thank you. Go to Councillor Langmaid and then Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try and keep my comments fairly short here. It's no secret to this council or anyone in this community where my heart lies in this matter and where I believe the right decision lies, and that's in making our community a more welcome place for everybody. And that includes recognizing the people who are already here. I don't see this, and I struggle to hear that this is a political issue because I don't believe this is about politics. This is about recognizing the rights of the people who live in our community to feel like, to number one, exist, number two, and to feel like they're safe and welcome in their community. This is one very small way that we can start to show that our community is a welcome place for LGBTQIA2S+ people. This, if we look back in history, this decision has actually been decided in Strathmore before. We have previously, past councils, not this council's, previous councils has approved a Pride crosswalk in Strathmore. And when I discussed this with members of the community, I received varied feedback. However, one common thread I heard was, wait, didn't we do that already? Which tells me that this is more than time. This is more than time that we do this. As my co-councillor, Councillor Peterson has mentioned, we have signs and symbols of welcome and inclusivity of all groups all over this town. This is another one. And I'm just going to keep it to that. I do not support this motion. I fully support the decision that has already been made by this council and by a majority of this council, and that's that a Pride Walk be installed in Strathmore. And I hope we can move on so that we can decide a location.
Thank you. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. I have two questions for administration, and then I have a question for a fellow councillor. My first question to administration is, are we creating any liability for ourselves if we approve one political display on public property, and then we deny some other group a political display on public property.
I think you're going to, if I can step in just for a moment, is we have to be careful with our wording because you're coming in with the assumption that it's a political statement to have a crosswalk. Others might say it's merely supporting a segment of our population whose rights may need to be protected and who may need to have some support within our community. CAO Scoble?
Well, I mean, the rules of the road apply, and if you contravene the Traffic Act, and you can be charged for that. If you're in contravention of the Traffic Act, there's no liability. I mean, this has been done in many, many communities on public roadways, and I'm not aware of any liability issues that have been pressed on any municipality in any of those instances.
If I may add to that, Your Worship, we've also, I'm not aware of all these, I'm aware of some of the communities that CEO Scoble spoke to. I'm not aware of any existing policies, but if necessary, we can do some research into that would overarching these things. But majority of communities that I'm aware of that have installed pride crosswalks do not have an established policy.
Thank you. Councilor Montgomery?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, it's one of those things where it's, depends on how the person views it, but anything with kind of meaning behind it could be interpreted as a political message. But I have a question for Jonathan, and that is, so I notice here that council needs to rescind the resolution that Councillor Wiley has moved to rescind in order to move the crosswalk. Is that correct?
Sorry, I missed that, Councillor.
So the motion that he made to rescind the motion, the previous resolution, that needs to pass in order to move the crosswalk, isn't that correct?
Yeah. The previous motion would have to be rescinded eventually because the recommendation would be to switch locations.
Okay, so if we all...
Okay, I'm still confused then, Jonathan. I thought I ruled the initial motion that was linking the pamphlets.
It's this right here.
This is the one. He wants the policy, the resolution.
Yeah, this needs to pass in order to move the crosswalk.
Okay, I see what you mean. So, Jonathan, I guess clarification then is, the question then is, do we need to rescind this bylaw that's been presented because the bylaw deals with the painting being done on the pathway?
No, it's a resolution.
It's a resolution.
This is the only resolution we need to do.
Would it help if I repeated what motion is on the floor?
Sure.
Sure. The only motion I put on the floor is I move that council rescind resolution number 179.02.23, the Pride Crosswalk resolution.
And that's what we're debating, and that's what we can vote on. And then once we do that, we can go back to this.
Okay, well, so I'm just going to point out that, we can all cross our arms and refuse to pass this, but we are going to pass this in a few minutes. I think we should probably just pass it so that we can move on to a debate about whether or not to approve the installation of a pride crosswalk at the north entrance of the Strathmore Municipal Building.
You could also amend the motion. So, Your Worship, so I think we should just deal with this, and I'm prepared. Sorry, should I speak in the microphone?
Sure, that'd be great.
So, Your Worship, I think we should just continue to deal with this, and that when we move on to 8.2, in the fullness of what's in front of council, that I am prepared at that time to simply make an amendment to 8.2 to 179.0723 on the occasion that Councillor Wiley's motion is not successful. I would be prepared with an amendment motion to just change the location of the crosswalk. So then we wouldn't need to rescind the motion. We can simply amend it in terms of location.
Jonathan or Kara, did you want to weigh in?
So absolutely, both options are available to council. It's ultimately what council is comfortable with. So that's what John and I were just discussing.
So does he need to accept your amendment? Or?
No, it's a separate issue,
Okay,
If
so
people are finished debating.
does anyone have anything else to say on that? Okay, then I'll,
Sorry, I do have a question.
one more
actually.
question.
Yes, Councilor Peterson. Sorry, I've been trying to kind of rack my brain about what other groups have been allowed to create political displays on public property, and I'm drawing a blank. So if you could just tell me what other groups or political symbols are you seeing on public property in town? That would kind of help me with this decision.
I'm not sure what you mean by political, Councillor Montgomery. If you want to talk about other groups and what they've put on public property, or other special interest groups, other community groups, other groups that come before this council, and where we've made decisions, I can speak to that, but I don't know what you mean by political. So if you'd like to define that, I'm prepared to attempt to answer the question.
I mean, I guess, yeah, it's kind of tough for me to come up with a definition on the spot, but I would say like it's where people are, usually divided by their political beliefs on a certain subject or a certain symbol, or where there's meaning behind a symbol that, might extend beyond what is superficially recognized. For instance, with a rainbow crosswalk, sure, it's a beautiful, thing, who doesn't like rainbows? Rainbows are great. But there is meaning behind the rainbow, specifically, that some people believe in and some people don't. And those beliefs are generally divided by political positions. So I believe that I guess you could also just say, if something wasn't political, then, you would probably you'd have a hard time finding people that are divided on a certain subject. So, I bet you 99% of people would agree rainbows are beautiful. I think you'd have a hard time getting the same agreement that a rainbow crosswalk doesn't have any sort of political meaning behind it.
Why don't we just vote on the motion to rescind the bylaw, and then all this discussion on whether or not a pride crosswalk is political or advancing a cause or causing some belief to spread like Marxism, why don't we deal with that just under the pride crosswalk potentially coming forward in a motion? So we do have a motion to rescind the bylaw, and then we also have another one that can be presented immediately after that, where we can start discussion on the pride crosswalk. So Councillor Wiley does have a motion on the floor, and I'll call the question. Is there Councillor Langmaid?
I'd like to request that this be recorded.
Okay, you'd like a recorded vote?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if I can just ask a question, we're streamed live. I mean, everyone's going to see the vote if they want. Okay, Councillor Peters?
The initial decision on this
confused.
was recorded, so I'd like this to
Okay.
be recorded as well.
Councillor Peterson? Did
Oh,
you have
I
another
nothing.
comment? Okay, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? And the motion is defeated. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I would move the council, I would move to amend resolution number 179.07.23 to read the council, from its current location, to now read, the council approve the installation of a pride crosswalk at the north entrance to the Strathmore Municipal Building parking lot on Park Lane Drive.
And did you want to speak to it?
I have already spoken to it, Your
Okay.
Worship.
All right, now we have that motion on the floor. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. So I guess I'll just echo my previous statements that public property should not be used for political displays of any ilk, whether that's conservative, liberal. It doesn't matter. It's everybody's property. Nobody should be made to feel that they are unwelcome or that their tax dollars are being used to promote political movements that they don't agree with. That's what private, funding of political movements is for, is so that people can do that with their own money. I would suggest it's inappropriate for us to approve something like this with a lack of a policy that would guide it relative to future actions when somebody from another political leaning comes to us. It's going to seem hypocritical to approve one group's display and not another group's display. And I think one of the main cruxes here, one of the problems is that this is being approved because it reflects the politics or the political leanings of some members of council here. And
If I could just stop you, you keep assuming that this is political, and I'm not sure everybody sees it as political.
well, that's just how I'm characterizing it.
Okay, well,
So-
you're characterizing it that way, but if I support this crosswalk, it doesn't mean that I think that they're politicizing it and that they're trying to spread the lifestyle or anything.
I'm not putting words in your mouth. This is only my opinion.
Okay, well, you're making a comment on those of us who vote for it, that we have political leanings, and I see it as just supporting a minority of people who have been treated pretty roughly over the last several decades. And
Which is, to that point, it's totally wrong. It's totally wrong that people should be mistreated for being different. It's wrong that in the past or in the present or in the future that people should be discriminated against based on their sexuality, their gender, their race. All of those things are horrible, and I stand firmly against those things, whether it's the government doing them or especially if it's government doing it, but certainly when it's private people as well, I think that's horrible. I do not approve of that. If you think that that's okay, then that's not right. That's my personal opinion. But I will say that this is more than just a bunch of pretty colors. I don't question, Becca, I don't question your motives or anything like that. I think that this comes from the goodness of your heart and nothing else. So I certainly don't, I'm not looking at it from that perspective. As Councillor Wiley even pointed out, to him, he sees this as, even if you just look at the disparate, kind of perspectives on what this symbolizes to people on this council, to some people it symbolizes inclusivity, and how can you say that a bunch of colors symbolize inclusivity unless you're ascribing a political meaning to them, okay? And so some people look at it and they see the advancement of Marxism, okay, and possibly the destruction of liberal democracy. And that's what makes this a political display in my mind. I have concerns about the liability aspect, eventually. Yeah, it's, if we, I don't know that we should necessarily count on the fact that, other places have not been sued, to kind of protect us. That's, people can still sue us for these types of things if we deny them their political speech. And then as well, I also have concerns that I raised before about the fact that we're putting it somewhere where we know historically, or at least I know historically from my own personal observations, that people do burnouts and drive aggressively on this spot. So, and I guess in the interest of protecting the town's reputation, because when we see other communities do a crosswalk and somebody does a burnout on it, it makes the news and people call it a hate crime. And so are we setting ourselves up to have the news reporting a hate crime in Strathmore, and how does that make us look? And are we just going to tell the media, this is not a hate crime. We knew ahead of time that people do burnouts here. It was intentionally placed where people do burnouts. Is that what we're going to tell the media? And if so, then that's fine, that's honest. But at least, we should be honest with ourselves that we are putting it somewhere where we are. I don't care about the maintenance, to be honest. The maintenance, yeah, we can paint it, however many times or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that we are putting it somewhere where we know that people are going to do something that will be construed as a hate crime or destruction of this political symbol. And I'll just point, yeah, I guess that's the end of my long-winded speech. Thank you.
Thank you. And originally, you mentioned a comment about tax dollars being used. It's my understanding that the group is going to do the painting and repainting as it's needed, so I don't see anything as far as public tax dollars going towards this. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just want to expand a little bit on why I don't think this is a political issue and why I really take issue with it being described as one during this meeting. A rainbow crosswalk doesn't actually represent any political party in Canada. If you search through their constitution documents, it actually talks about every single party respecting the rights, the human rights of people in Canada. This is not political. It's not used to advance a political agenda. This is not even our agenda. This was brought to us by the community. The community is asking us to allow them to include a symbol of their inclusion, of their just plain darn existence within our community. This isn't political. This is about recognizing who lives here. This is about recognizing a community group who wants to accomplish something in this town. And as I've told many people, if another community group would like a crosswalk, come talk to us, but no one has. We don't need a policy on this. This is about answering the needs of our community. So, thank you for giving me the chance to speak.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Worship. Just to close out the debate on this issue, I think that, we have had people spin out in our parking lot. I remember a time when the vintage cars were here and somebody did a spin out across the freshly painted lines. And, I know that the people who painted those lines felt that that was a hate crime. They were extremely upset. But I think that we should be very careful in not ever characterizing pride events as a threat to societal norms. Because when we do that, we also say that we're promoting a dangerous agenda. And to do that makes me complicit in a much more serious denigration of a community group, and it goes directly against the liberal democratic views of community being for everyone. And so I am very much in favor of putting this crosswalk right outside our door in a very dominant area of the community where everyone can see it and where it's protected by camera, and that we can fix it when the group has already said that they are more than welcome to do this. And as you said so eloquently, Your Worship, there are no tax dollars involved in it. Thank you.
I'll go again to Councillor Montgomery, and then maybe if everyone's finished, we can put this to a vote. Councillor Montgomery?
Thank you. So I looked up the definition of political issue, and so a definition that's provided here is political means relating to the way power is achieved and used in a country or society. So we've talked a lot about how this, represents a minority and a group that's like marginalized, which relates to power in our country or society. And then also, as a noun, a political issue is an issue that is an important subject that people are arguing about or discussing, which I think the fact that we've had such a long discussion about this kind of proves in and of itself that this is a political issue. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. My last comments would be the thing that has always guided me as a counselor and as a mayor, and I think it's been told to us, and it might even be in the MGA, is that we're supposed to make decisions based on what we think is in the best interests of the majority of the community. So in all my dealings and all my relationships and friendships and teaching students who've come out as gay, I feel strong enough to support this Rainbow Crosswalk as a sign, not of a political agenda or furthering a cause or increasing numbers or spreading the ideas of it. It's just, I see it, and I think the majority of Strathmore residents are open-minded and willing to look out for a marginalized community like this. I just see it as a support. It's one more support so that they feel welcome and that they feel like they're part of our community, and that and that's, you know, it's going to be a definition as to whether one person thinks it's political and one person thinks it's just a sign of support. So I just come back to the idea, I think the majority of Strathmore residents either don't care too much about this or they feel that it's not such a bad thing. And so I will be supporting the motion. Does anyone else have any further comments? Then I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion presented by Councillor Peterson? And opposed? So the motion is carried. And we move now to item 9. Sorry. 8.3?
Councillor Montgomery pulled 8.3 off.
Oh, right, okay, 8.3, rural renewal stream. And that is because we have a motion on the floor to defer it to a certain date, and we're possibly going to look beyond that. Councillor Montgomery.
Thank you. Well, council probably, you know, if you checked your email this past week, you saw that I sent an email with an attachment that was put together by the people at Community Futures in our town here, Community Futures Wildrose. So just to provide some context, so earlier this year, our council agreed to fund a study that is being done in partnership with other regional municipalities. We contributed $15,000 to that study. And so with the way the timeline has been unfolding for the study, and so this study, for the public's knowledge, has to do with analyzing the workforce, the labor force in the region, and as well the labor needs, and basically also what like businesses are looking at as far as like their needs. And this will be a very comprehensive kind of analysis of what the situation on the ground is, and will provide data to us as well as you know, providing some options and directions. And so they've informed me, and this was I believe communicated in the package, but that so at the end of near the third week of October, they will be hosting a strategic planning session with the other regional municipalities, and they have asked us to provide, I will be attending, but they have asked us to provide a member of the town staff whose responsibility will be to advocate for the town's position on, as they kind of look at kind of planning going forward. And then as well, they also informed me that the draft report will not be ready until sometime in November. So with that, so basically, you know, I think it'd be premature to bring the rural renewal stream agenda item back for October 4th because we will not have the analysis that we've, you know, paid $15,000 for by that time, and as well we will have we'll be kind of you know, preempting the strategic planning that's going to go along with that as well. So I will make a motion that council defer the discussion of the rural renewal stream to the I'll say the second meeting in November, which is, do you have any idea what that is, Jonathan?
Thank you, Worshiping Council. Would that be the Committee of the Whole November? That'd be November 8th.
Well, I was thinking like, because you guys want it done on a council meeting, or do you want it done
I
on
have a
like
suggestion.
on the committee of the whole?
So the one thing I would say here too is that these meetings will get scheduled at the org meeting, so we would just be assuming that these dates are approved at the organizational meeting. November 15th is the second regular council meeting.
Okay, so yeah, so I'll move that we defer the discussion on the rural renewal stream to the November 15th regular council meeting, and that administration provide a knowledgeable staff member to attend the strategic planning in the third week of October. Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Councillor Peterson, discussion?
Your Worship, first of all, I just think that, it would be useful because we're not sure that this is going to come out in the middle of November, so that it might be better to amend the motion to make it the decision as to when to bring it back commensurate with the CAO's judgment as to the best time to do that. And, and as for directing the CAO to place a town staff on here, to me, that's crossing a line. I think that's moving into operations, and I think that our CAO has the information, he knows what it is, and that's a decision that he would make independent of us. Like, that's an operational decision that doesn't require our direction. But,
And I think it came from a request from
yeah,
from
it
a
did.
person
It
on
already came
Community
through the
Futures.
email, so
Yeah.
so our CAO would deal with it. Doesn't need to be a direction from council.
So if we leave your motion as is, it would involve the designating a staff member. Are you comfortable removing the second part of your motion and entrusting our CAO to potentially put a staff member on it at his discretion?
Well, I don't think it should be potential. Like, I guess if CAO Scoble says that he will have somebody there, then that satisfies me. It would be not a good idea to not have somebody there to advocate on the town's behalf as a staff member.
Well, thank you for that. I wouldn't support the motion just because I don't plan on directing into operations. I would support the first part of your motion, but not the second part.
And I would support the motion in the first part of the motion in its intent, but I don't think that it's wise to put a date on it. I think we can leave it to CAO discretion. They've already made arrangements to bring it back. We know that they're going to. We know that they've already put enormous energy into this, and I know that the value of this economic development action is understood.
All right, I will move that we rescind that motion.
Okay. So we have a motion to rescind that motion. All in favor? That motion is carried.
All right, Mr. Scoble. Do you plan on having a staff member attend the?
I guess we'll
strategic
step
plan?
back. It's actually the town that's overseeing all the phases of this. We are tied at the hip with Community Futures, but actually we are providing guidance and advice, and we have been overseeing the entire thing. So yes, we will be at the meeting. It is a town-led. The overall rural renewal is town-led, and there's different groups supporting us in the social phase and the business phase. And yes, Community Futures, we asked them to help us with this. They are doing this at the town of Strathmore's request.
So you're saying that the workforce project that all of the municipalities in the region are funding is done at the town's behalf?
It's a part of it, yes. Have presented this 2 or 3 times at council where this fits in. FCSS has a separate component that they're working on. The two of them will come together to provide an overall recommendation on the rural renewal, excuse me, rural renewal to council.
Yeah, so this is somewhat independent of the rural renewal. This is a workforce analysis project for the region. That's why I just want to make sure that we will have somebody there. If you say that we will, that's fine.
I will go myself if my staff are not available.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, excellent. All right, then I will move that, I guess in line with Councillor Peterson's comments, I will move that we defer the rural renewal stream discussion to a time when administration has received the draft report. Is that satisfactory?
Why don't you just say commensurate with the CAO's judgment on the optimum time? Because there's many more things to it Sorry, Your Worship,
That's okay. I want a clean motion too, where we give the staff time, we give council time to go through the labor study so that we can have it brought back at an efficient time for CAO Scoble and his staff, and that we have a chance to read the material. I know some of us have jobs during the day, and some of us are
Yeah, that's
pretty
why
busy.
I left it open-ended, and
Yeah.
it's basically kind of implied in the motion that administration, once they receive the document, and have had a chance to, analyze it and then, decide where to put it in an agenda. I'm just saying it should be after we get the draft, that's all.
Your Worship, may I
So-
speak?
Yeah, we have a motion on the floor.
The problem with this, so the economic development, the Community Futures role in this is important, and I recognize that. And, through the direction of the work that I've already seen come across this desk, the town has been integral to the direction that they've taken. An even bigger piece of that is the piece undertaken by the Family Community Support Services. And then the biggest piece of all is the work that our senior legislative team have done on it. So, from our community perspective, this is just one component. So, for me, I have complete and total faith in the fact that this will come back when our senior leadership team have made the judgment that the timing is optimal. And because there are many, many pieces, not just this one. So that's why I don't want it tied to this. I don't want the motion tied to this. The rural renewal stream has many pieces, and this senior leadership team has already invested hugely in it.
Jonathan, can you read back Councillor Montgomery's latest motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was actually going to ask council
Okay.
just to repeat the motion that's on the.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So it's, I will move the council defer the discussion on the rural renewal stream until after we have received the draft report from Community Futures. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Langmaid?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just being cognizant of the other things that we have going on at that time of year in November, I am concerned that if we wait until November to have this discussion, we will miss critical things that we need to consider during the budget process that we'll also be going through at that time of year. I understand it's important to wait for the work that Community Futures is doing, and I'm excited to read that report when it's ready, but my preference would be to receive the update on the schedule that's already been recommended by administration, which is October 4th, so that we can receive it, at the very least, an update on some of the other pieces that go into the rural renewal stream consideration and project, so that we can have a fuller understanding as we go into budget discussions. Thank you.
Thank you. I wouldn't support the motion, or a motion, to have it deferred to October, because I just don't think that's enough time, and it does come before the labor study. So I think we would have a lot more information, and it would be a lot more helpful to our CAO and his staff to allow more time. This rural renewal stream is something that's, I find, very complex, and I would need some time to go through it and understand it. And again, I want to take into consideration that we have, like you said, we have our budgeting process coming and meeting with our groups, or listening to our groups coming for funding. I'm comfortable with the new motion on the floor, because it does say after we've received and gone through the information. And I trust our CAO to bring it back to a time when he thinks his staff is comfortable with what he's seen. We've all read through the labor study, and we can look at a decision based on that. Councillor Langmaid?
Yes, just reiterating the point that the workforce study is not the only component that is being worked on for this rural renewal stream. It is certainly a part of it, and it's an important part of it, and I am looking forward to it, but there are other things in progress, like CAO Scoble just referred to, the FCSS program, all of that. And they did, we wouldn't be imposing an October 4th timeline. That's what came in the agenda as recommended to us today. I also have concerns that if we pass a motion saying that we will not hear this again until after the workforce study is complete, should that workforce study be delayed, would this motion actually prevent us from hearing other updates, hearing that we wouldn't hear from CAO Scoble until after that was received? So if for some reason it's delayed until the new year, will we not receive any information on this until that point? I have full faith in CAO Scoble that if something urgent was to come up, he would find a way to get us that information, but I don't want to place additional barriers, hurdles, difficulties in front of administration sharing information with us at a time that they find appropriate.
Thank you. So if everyone on council is clear on Councillor Montgomery's motion, you'd be looking at dealing with this differently than having this deferred to October. It would be deferred to a later date after the work study. And if you're not comfortable and you want to stick to the recommended motion, then you wouldn't be supporting this motion. Everyone's clear on that? Councillor Montgomery, did you have a further comment?
Not at this time, thank you.
Okay. So we have a motion. Does anyone else want to speak on it?
I would just say that if that November date comes, I would be fully open to administration coming forward to us, just like they did tonight, to say there are still outstanding issues that we need to address to deal with this. And I'm thinking about, that's why this November date with this report from Wild Rose doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me. Letting the CAO have a discretionary powers over this makes sense because there is new federal legislation coming out. And it's not, the fulsome understanding that I have of the federal legislation is that it's a work in progress, that there are still 3 major components of that federal legislation that still needs to connect to the provincial legislation that is not rolled out yet. And I'm thinking January is probably going to be a more reasonable time. I know you can do updates anytime, and I know that.
CAO Scoble?
I guess just to build on Councillor Peterson's point, because she covered somewhere I was going to make, I just want to be clear that there's kind of 3 key aspects to this. There's the social aspect, which is being handled through FCSS. The labor force was identified early on, and we went and talked to Community Futures, and they've undertaken this broader study for the region, which is great. And then the third is the different levels of government, not just the federal government, as Councillor Peterson has talked about, but there's been active discussions with the provincial government through our government relations functions and our economic development functions on some of the changes they're considering too. So we intend to regularly update, and we can update in November for sure. And if there's a market regulatory change from different levels of government or whatever, we'll keep council apprised as these things go. But there's no problem giving progress updates, but certainly it will not be a final report in November either.
Maybe it's the cobwebs in my head. Councillor Montgomery, did your latest motion mention November 20th, or did you keep it open-ended as far as having read the report and gone through it?
No, the motion was just that we wait until after we've received the draft report before we discuss the rural renewal stream.
Okay.
It's been told to me that if we were to, it'd be like basically, having a discussion where we don't have all the information, and then, we get the information and we go, oh, okay, well, that changes, this, and this. So we would be better off to wait and get the information that we paid for rather than, and this motion does not preclude CAO Scoble from bringing something to us, and saying, hey, we should talk about this or this. It's just a simple motion to defer this. There's nothing kind of binding about this. We're obviously not going to, come down on anybody if they want to discuss rural renewal or an aspect of it before. I just think, we shouldn't be looking to make a decision on rural renewal until we have the information that we need. That's all.
So your motion on the floor gives a lot of latitude to our CAO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a motion on the floor. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. We move now to bylaws, and we have none. Number 10, councillor information and inquiries. 10.1, questions between councillors and council statements. Councillor Wegener and then Councillor Wiley.
So I guess is this the part where I can rant and make my motion? Anyways, I would like to make a motion to amend bylaw 2317, which is our council procedural bylaw, to add a motion to rescind a motion which has been passed or to renew a defeated motion may be offered subsequent to the meeting at which the motion was passed or defeated. If that rescinded motion is brought more than 6 months after the date of the original motion, or a member who voted with the prevailing side may move to reconsider the motion, or brought after a general municipal election which has taken place since the date of the original motion.
Okay, sorry, I think Councillor Montgomery, you have a point of order?
Yeah, just, I'm pretty sure our procedure bylaw says that if it's over a certain number of words, it has to be in writing, just because it's,
Okay.
so yes, you would have to provide that to the rest of us in writing, just so we can understand what's going on. Thank you.
Motion for a brief recess?
Motion for a recess. All in favor? And we're taking a quick recess.
Well, Councilor Wagner takes a snapshot and sends that.